having some technical difficulties. So we're going to go ahead and start over from the top. I have with us Miss Christy Jones and Dr. Austin Okumo, as well as Princess, the founder of AfriGentry Link. So if you guys would like to give brief introductions, then we'll jump right back into the content for the day.
Hi there, my name is Christy Jones. I'm a teaching artist and journalist and educator. I'm here to have a robust discussion about the diaspora. I particularly look at it through a lens of arts and culture and heritage. So I'm excited to connect today.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Austin Okumo, public health expert and a DNA advocate. I'm here to just contribute to a topic that is always very dear to our mind, the truth they never told us, how the transatlantic slave trade still impacts Africans and the diaspora. Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys for those introductions. And if you don't know, the topic for today, as they have been mentioning, is the truth they never told us, how the transatlantic slave trade still impacts Africa and the diaspora. So with that, I guess we'll roll right into some discussion questions. So Dr. Akumo, do you think Africans fully understand the trauma, identity loss, and generational pain carried by diaspora communities as a result of slavery and displacement?
Well, it might be good to start with some statistical realities. Before any discussion can heal, we must be first grounded in historical evidence, undeniable facts. What we're talking about, transatlantic slave trade, that happens like 400 plus years ago. For us to know, the transatlantic slave trade database put it that over 12.5 million Africans were forcibly transported in the 15 to 1900s. What happened? About 2 million plus died on the middle of the road. And to today, over 140 million diaspora worldwide are just scattered everywhere without. African nations, about 54 of them had gone what? Whose gene pools were disrupted? We don't know. What does that mean in reality? Does someone who was born 400 years ago still alive? The truth is not true. So to put it, Africans does not understand the reality of what transatlantic slave trade did to us. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's an interesting perspective, especially when you mention the sort of what I'm hearing is like a bit of a disconnect between the people that were separated and where the diaspora is, and naturally where the rest of Africans are. So that's interesting. But when you mention that, it kind of makes me wonder, how has Africa itself continued to suffer from the long-term effects of slavery, colonization, and historical separation from the diaspora?
So first of all, to do justice to that, we'll call about mentality, right? So there's a colonial mentality that still persists. Centuries of colonial education system taught Africans how to measure their self-worth against European and Western standards. What does that affect? It helps us to create deep identity confusion that still affects how Africans see themselves today. That not enough, the cultural disruption. Colonial powers disrupted ancient governance, spiritual systems, and social structures. Community lost frameworks for collective healing, and what? They could not sustain them to today. A key one that you must talk about is the systemic instability. The land, Africa, was fragmented into many ethnic groups during this colonization. It created artificial borders and long-term political instability that weakened African capacity to reconnect with the diaspora. What does that mean? The remains in Africa see people in diaspora as not part of them. And people in diaspora never see themselves as being able to connect back. What of the education gap? Many Africans sees the Western education or understanding that pain, identity lost, and generational trauma experienced from diaspora communities. They are never ever really identified as true Africans, and they themselves don't see one. It's akin to when the Israelites were sent to see the land of Canaan. 10 of them had a testimony. They said, we saw the land. It actually flowed with milk and honey. But the people that dwell there, they are bigger and they see us as grasshoppers. That's the story of colonial mentality that persists with us. So I think a lot more could be said, but I'll let me end there right now.
Okay, I think that is a good transition point for you, Christy. I do have a question for you and for the diaspora at large. Growing up, what were you taught about Africa, and how did that shape the way you saw yourself, your identity, and your connection to the continent?
Yeah, definitely. I was really fortunate to grow up in the inner city. So I grew up in Los Angeles, and I was able to really connect to hip hop music. So what you're seeing are Google images of this is Erica Badu, the head wrap, the symbol in the ring. The other image you see is Queen Latifah. If you could go to the next slide, yeah, Queen Latifah. You see the African medallions. That was something that was really special to us. We were like really on a quest to find out who we were, and we were resisting this notion of white supremacy. So just as you talked about the movement of us from Africa to America, once we got here, this notion of white supremacy continued. And so throughout our African American history, we were constantly, and we are constantly resisting that notion that we're not human. So in American history, this idea that we're 3/5 of a person, or if you have one drop of Black blood, you're Black, and all of these ridiculous ideas and notions about our worthiness and humanity, we always resisted. And so for me, hip hop music in the 90s, we were really yearning to connect to our African roots. And it was a form of resistance for us to show America that we do know who we are, and we are connected in an artistic way. Youth culture, we're really, as youth, you're bold, you're outrageous. So we were wearing the big old Africa medallions and being proud of it. And we didn't care what the white culture had to say about it. And we didn't care about white beauty's standards of beauty. We really were connecting to our dark skin and to this notion of kings and queens and who we were before colonization came upon the scene. Yeah, so that's definitely how I was able to resist the notion that I wasn't good enough. And so, again, I was fortunate to grow up in inner city Los Angeles. So I went to a Black church. I went to an African Methodist Episcopal church. So I went to First AME Church. And so AME churches are all over America. Why? Because we weren't allowed to worship in mainstream white churches. So you had folks that were, moving along our history and creating our own. And that's really thematic for African Americans because of the oppression, because of this notion that we're not good enough. We've always had to make our own thing happen. And so there's always been a lot of jealousy around that strength to be disconnected from Africa, not really knowing our language, not really knowing a lot about our identity, but coming here and recreating a new culture that's rooted in African culture. So for me, the Black church, going to a Black high school, I had a Black principal. I had Black teachers. We read Black books. We were taught about Marcus Garvey and Pan-Africanism. So we had this image of one day we'll be able to travel to Africa and meet African people. Hip hop was a really big way for us to learn about Africa from rappers that were talking about Egypt and, Kemetic symbols and all these different things that were educating us about Africa. We were not getting that in curriculum in school. We were getting it through hip hop. Also through church, again, we celebrated Kwanzaa, which, as an African American professor created that to help kind of connect us to our African roots. Again, thinking about those Kemetic symbols and thinking about just reconnecting and reflecting on our Black roots. And then, again, fashion, thinking about kente cloth, head wraps. So many African braiding shops are in urban cities, and we go there as African Americans to get our hair braided. We want the Fulani cornrows. We want, this, that, or the third, because we want to be connected to Africa. We want to express that, particularly as a form of resistance to say, we do not buy into the notion that we are less than and that we're not human. So growing up for me, I'm very fortunate that I carry that sense of Black pride and that sense of Pan-Africanism. It has been really helpful for me to be in teaching spaces with multicultural students to demonstrate that pride in my culture, for them to have pride in their culture and home language as well. So I'm very thankful that I had a positive idea of Africa growing up. I had many people to reinforce the beauty and the power of Africa and being proud to be African American. So yeah, that's my experience.
Wow, I think I just want to time into what Christy said. This is so beautiful to just listen to the hair, and how the diaspora connect to Africa is a little bit different from how Africans connect to Africa. Just trying to time into what Dr. Steen said when he mentioned the statistics, and talking about how we perceive the diaspora and how we understand the trauma of transatlantic slave trade. But I would say honestly that we don't really think, or I don't think that many Africans fully understand the depth of the pain, because it was not deeply taught in school. Growing up, I didn't really understand what slave trade means and what the impact is, because we were not taught in school. They didn't teach us in school. And I think that's what needs to change, because now, because of internet, because of social media, the social world we are, many Africans now, are beginning to understand slavery historically, but not quite emotionally. Or psychologically, because from the perspective of the diaspora is more of emotional pain and psychological pain. But when it comes to Africa, for now, they are really understanding it, but it's more of historically, oh, okay, it was told that transatlantic slave trade happened, but the emotional aspect of it has not been felt. And I think the more we start reading books, and the more we try to connect to diaspora, knowing their pains, we now understand it emotionally and have that conversation around it.
One point that you raised quickly, you were able to reflect on your African roots, and from all that you presented, which is very correct, you related to the Skora beads and all that, which have African resemblance. But in reality, that speaks to me like physical transformation, right? Not spiritual transformation. So physically, an African in diaspora is transformed, right? It kind of wants to see himself by wearing this as identity. But deep in your roots, deep in your heart, you begin to see that there's a vacuum there. There's a hollow, which African AGL is coming to close the gap. The gap is health, healing, and heritage. Okay. And that's the essence of having this overall discussion, to begin to see how do we then therefore begin to heal the inner soul, right? As a result of this transatlantic trade that happened some many years ago. For example, in the United States here, you see it is, you talk about the identity closing the gap between the whites and the black, right? The black American. But let me say the truth. I don't know, but from my personal observation, you see there's a bit of more turn downs among the black than the whites even. The acceptance is low of the black American, and that resonate with the fact that inward there is still the wound, right? Because today the DNA report shows that over 30% of all DNA tested have their roots to Africa. That means that Africa is the only true identity, the race that have the root of all race. So how do we begin to tease out ways of connecting that gap, bridging the bridge between those in Africa and those in diaspora by DNA testing? And then we begin to talk about the health component and the health aspect of it. But that's another one. I just time in there to tell you that there's a physical transformation, but there's deep gap inside spiritually, right? And the Bible also said that be ye transformed by the renewal of your mind. So the mind needs to be renewed before it reflects outside. So what we are trying to see now is inside, outside, in the transformation that's currently happening now. But what we are preaching is inside out. And that will bring peace and harmony to the body and soul and spirit. Thank you.
Yes, thank you everyone for that. That's very informative. It's nice to see kind of your insight on the gap that still exists, and like not ignoring that gap is a real thing that we're trying to heal here, and that's why we're having these discussions. And on the other hand, when you were speaking, Christy, about how African Americans manifest their identity, sort of with their roots to their African heritage. I'm hearing everything you're saying, and I'm just playing the Rolodex in my mind. I grew up similar communities, and you see all that, and I can relate to a lot of that. So it was pretty cool to hear that, and just to see how I can hear the things you're saying and see them in my day-to-day life, especially as a child growing up. So that's interesting. But to piggyback off of that, I guess my next question is, in what ways do you think slavery, racism, and generational disconnection still affect diaspora communities today, emotionally, economically, culturally, or spiritually?
Yeah, that's a really heavy question. So what I'm going to lean into is I want to talk about the concept of racism, because that really helps to talk about all those pieces that you've mentioned: emotionally, economically, culturally, spiritually. So in the last question, I alluded to the fact that as Black people in America, once we got here, we've always had to deal with this notion that we're not human, that we're less than. We always had to deal with this notion of white supremacy. And not only did we have to deal with that, there were very intentional laws and consequences put into place to keep us from participating in literacy. So we weren't allowed to read. We weren't allowed to have library cards. We weren't allowed to have access to books. We weren't allowed to open bank accounts. We weren't allowed to do this. We weren't allowed to do that. And so in 1921, years prior to that, the African American community post-slavery created their own community because of all of the things, Jim Crow laws at the time, and you can't do this, you can't do that. So came together in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and said, you know what? Yes, we can. We're going to create our own economic freedom. Beautiful. Black Wall Street is what they called it. And so the image that you're seeing, I got from Public Radio Tulsa. This is the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, a photographic history. And this is from a professor, Carlos Cahill. He's the associate professor and chair of the African and African American Studies Department at the University of Oklahoma. And so, Black Wall Street, we had wealth. We had our own banks, we had our own hospitals. But guess what? Massacre, that word in red, it is for real. White supremacists came in and literally bombed and decimated and destroyed the entire infrastructure that was built. And so what we need to understand through this example in our American history is that every attempt of African Americans to have upward mobility, to bring themselves up economically, there's always a counter attack from the enemy, which are white supremacists who believe that we don't deserve to exist, and we surely don't deserve to have anything close to what they have in wealth and power and access, and definitely not making decisions, and definitely not having self-determination to do what we want to do with our own lives. So this is a point that I want to invite the entire diaspora to come into to help you really understand racism. It isn't just about someone looking at your dark skin and, oh my goodness, you're Black. It's so much more deeper. It is a diseased way of thinking. It is the stain on our American culture and our American history, this very perverted way of thinking that a group of people are not human. It's disgusting. And so this is just one of many examples, unfortunately, of how white supremacy has destroyed Black people throughout history. Economically, that set us back decades. Everything that we gained in that particular moment in history where we built our own infrastructure economically and had our own stores and had our own way of being, that set us back. There are survivors that recently passed that never received reparations. So this is the real deal. This is an example that everyone in the diaspora has got to take a look at and know more about. But when you talk about the stereotype that African Americans are lazy and they don't want to, they just don't want to do anything, because that's the narrative they try to throw out there to pit us against each other. Like, we're the inferior group of Black people. We don't deserve our African title because we're not acting like royalty. We don't want that. That is complete a lie. It is a complete lie. What you need to understand is that Black people have had the intuition, the ambition, the energy to even in the face of white supremacy, go out and build their own. We've always had that entrepreneurial spirit, but you have to remember that racism put into place laws and consequences of catching you, lynching you, killing you, coming into your home, taking what they wanted. White supremacists. We had absolutely no power. And so you think about the civil rights movement many years later, why that breaking point, that climax had to happen in our history, because as we talked about, 400 years of oppression, just over and over and over and over and over again, until this big swell happened and we have the civil rights moment. But I need people in the diaspora to understand that racism is real, is not something in Black Americans' imaginations. We have suffered from it. It has totally destroyed our economic base, and we continue to try to catch up and catch up and catch up. And it is exhausting, and it's difficult to watch, especially in current history with our current president taking over 1 point something billions of dollars to pay money to the insurrectionists, the white supremacist resurrectionists. Excuse me, I'm so angry that these people are going to get payment for tearing up the state capitol. They're going to get payment. And my African American brothers and sisters, we have been fighting for reparations for decades upon decades. So resurrectionists, that's how you say it. Okay, let me get it together so you can understand. So racism, and we have got to come together and agree and affirm us as African Americans, like, yes, brothers and sisters in America, we see what has happened to you. It is real. It's not a figment of your imagination.
I don't think anyone could follow that up.
Yeah,
that was a powerful.
I want to follow that up. I can see the anger and the pain is just there. And the thing about all this white supremacy is it was there before we were even born. So So it's something we inherited. It's just like a saying, someone that hates your mother will hate you. You inherit it by not doing anything or offending the offender, whatever. You inherited it. So we inherited that. And when you look at, there's something I was trying to, I remembered when Christy was, saying all these things. We talk about Memorial Day. Memorial Day is coming up, right? Who started it? The blacks. So the blacks started the Memorial Day, and this Memorial Day was started in May 1st, 1865, in Charleston, South Carolina, by black people that were newly freed, from soldiers, from the slavery and everything. They organized a crowd of people, you know, black women, black men, children. They marched, sang, laid flowers to honor the soldiers who died for them to secure their freedom. And at the end of the day, we are celebrating this Memorial Day. When we celebrate it, I just want us to remember how everything started. And when you look at it, everybody, including white people, are celebrating it. Black people that started it are celebrating it. So if I maybe the white supremacy or whatever they mentioned can just look at it and see that we are one people, and these people are carrying pains. If the what these people called, the transatlantic slave trade, the highest crime, the greatest crime in human history. That's what it is, because it tore families apart. It separated families. It scattered people, not only physically, emotionally, culturally, everything. And the pain has been there, even though it happened over 400 years ago. We are still passing through that because of, how, as Christy said, we are being treated. The white supremacy, you are seeing it. Payment wants to be done to these people that destroyed. Then it shows that there is no remorse to what they did. And it provokes the thought of the black people to say, wow, so you guys has not recognized, or you guys have not recognized what was done. But the more we kept saying it, the more we kept pouring our feelings, the more we are still reminding them that we are one, we are human beings, we are not animals. I believe that the healing will, the conversation and this reconnection we are trying to do now, the reconnection will definitely bring healing that we need. It's just what I want to add in there.
One of the Steve Biko, he said the most important potent weapon in the hand of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. I still want to say this again and again. Slave trade was a legal thing one time, okay, until it was abolished. And then when it was abolished, when people were beginning to heal, a modern slavery began. And this is where it's complicating the Africans and the Aborigine Africans that went through the trauma of slave trade, that were coming up with a self-identity, a new set, a new batch of new slave-minded personalities were added to this. So we have two kind of people suffering different trauma. Some transatlantic trauma, slave trade. They were born here, they never cost anything. Others moved into it. While those ones begin to see themselves as, oh, we are Americans, the new ones that came in saw themselves as, oh, we are also Americans. So we have another shade of slave trade going on. So this healing is what we really need now, to begin to talk to people that, look, when you come in as someone who's relocated from your own country to America, what makes you an American? The only thing that makes you an American, apart from carrying American citizenship, which is or green card, It's the English you speak. And if you don't not speak English, they say to you, you are not American. They define you by your accent. So whatever it is that we must talk about right now with the open minds is that how can we know our ancestry? And because when you know your ancestry, you know the risk. And when you know the risk, the first step towards healing continues. We don't know. For example, I met here in America some guy in an exam center, and he asked me, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm a Nigerian." The Nigerian said, "Yes, it's okay." He said, "I did my DNA test, ancestry test the other day, and I found that 30% of my DNA was traced to Nigeria, Meduguri." And this is a guy who have not lived there. But do you know, because of that alone, till today we are friends. So what am I trying to say here? How can we liberate ourselves from the mental slavery that we cannot put ourselves right now? That's exactly what we should begin to think. And that's what AGL is coming to bridge the gap between Africans and African in diaspora. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for that. I did want to quickly just shout out the people in the comments. I want to say thank you, Paul and Fidelis, for the kind words and the support. And yes, thank you, Jessica, as well. Tulsa was just one of many, as Christy was mentioning. This was kind of a systemic thing that was going on throughout America for however many, a long time. Some might say that in some ways it's still going on. So thank you for that insight. I did want to move on to the next question, still for you, Christy. Why do you think so many people are now searching for ancestry, DNA, and reconnection?
Yeah, definitely. Well, for me, thinking about the Black Lives Matter movement, um, growing up as an African American and being an African American scholar, studying African American literature, African American history, the civil rights movement, that is kind of the movement of movements, if you will, as far as our generation is concerned. And so for me to be alive, and not only be alive to witness a movement, but also a global health pandemic, which had horrible impact on African Americans, which we can touch on in a moment. But the movement itself, the protest, that was the very first time that I ever saw Black people in the diaspora looking at each other and actually speaking to each other, affirming each other, saying, I see you, brothers and sisters, I see you, throwing up the fist. And that was the first time in my life that I actually felt a universal conversation of Black folks everywhere. It was so powerful and so strong. Even though we were socially distant at the time and wearing masks, the way that we're communicating now, that's how we got started with this Zoom and streaming and all that type of thing, where we got to this technology, and all of a sudden there's no barriers. I'm in Zoom meetings that are everywhere, and I'm able to talk to Black people everywhere. I never had that opportunity before. And so for me, the Black Lives Matter movement was this opportunity in history that is very special in terms of the diaspora, in that the intersection of the COVID-19 health situation and the intersectionality of wanting to understand self and get back to self and talk and face other people, other Blacks in other parts of the world. I think that really was the catalyst for folks saying, you know what? Let me turn to DNA. I want to know exactly where I'm from. I'm looking in the mirror at my brother over in France and over in, this country, that country. And it was just blowing folks' minds. Over in the Caribbean, it was blowing folks' minds. It was reminding people that we are interconnected. We are Black. We are Black. And it was just like this sense of pride. And then the resources that started pouring out of this book list and websites and social media content. And folks were beginning to really, and even a lot of white folks were starting to be curious and wanting to find out truth and wanting to understand Africa. And Africa was getting a moment in history, in my opinion, as an African American, that I had never seen before. And it was thrilling and it was exciting for someone across the ocean to tell me, brother, sister, I see you, and throw up a fist. It was too much, and too much in a good way, that I just welcomed that interaction with the diaspora during this particular moment in history. And now shifting to COVID-19, that has such ramifications on the Black community. So many of us perished because of COVID, because it exacerbated pre-existing conditions in Black folks, diabetes and all a host of other medical issues. And so DNA testing would be absolutely imperative for us now, as we're trying to come out of the shadows of that situation, to really understand our health and to really understand what our DNA history can help us to understand and unlock, so we can break those generational curses for African Americans, those things that plague us far much worse than anyone else. If you ever hear a commercial or see a documentary or hear any snippet of information, it's depressing, because African Americans, we have the worst statistics across the board. But why? Because of racism that hindered us, stifled us. We're still behind the finish line. We're still trying to catch up. And that's where we are. But DNA testing can definitely give us the relief and the joy of knowing I do have an identity. I am somebody, as late Jesse Jackson said, I am somebody. I'm Black, and there is a place for me that I'm connected to. So that's the exciting thing for me as an African American. I'm thinking about Black Lives Matter, how it uncovered so many discussions about Africa, the diaspora, and health.
Yeah, just to time into what Christy said about Black Life Matters. That was my first time as well, seeing the unity between diaspora and Africa, because it was happening here in Africa. It was booming. Everybody was tweeting, joining Zoom calls, reposting, sharing. I got you. It was all love. And that movement, I wish we can have that kind of movement. But at the end of the day, the only thing about it is just for us to know the truth and cleave ourselves to the truth. That's when the healing will take place. And that's how that kind of movement will sustain. And the movement we are in now is repatriation and reconnection, because we need it.
Absolutely. And I just want to say one last thing. I wanted to give credit to this photo. This is from an article from The Atlantic. It's written by Sarita McFarlane. She's a writer and professor of English at the Borough of Manhattan, Community College, City University of New York. I just wanted to make sure I sourced that image.
Well, thank you for that. And I think we're at a point in the conversation where we would like to get some more direct dialogue, kind of from the perspectives of diaspora and Africans themselves. So to start this kind of truth sharing conversation, what misunderstandings or invisible walls still exist between Africa and the diaspora? And how do we begin rebuilding trust, understanding, healing, and true reconnection?
Walls. We talk about the invisible walls are nothing but misunderstandings that still divide Africa and the diaspora, right? So, like I told you before, that misunderstanding did not begin today, but we have to begin to rebuild. We need to understand this misunderstanding. First of all, the Africans kind of, why don't they believe they just can't come home? Why they don't just believe they come home? The African says they abandon African values. For example, in Africa before now, when if a male child plaits his hair. It's a taboo. But we've been made to believe that from a very practical example, the people that plait hair in diaspora in the Western world, they are mostly Black Americans and Africans. And why do we want to emulate this? So there's a long thing coming. Secondly, like first question you ask, do we really understand the African struggle? Oh, so you begin to hear things that there are two Westerns to reconnect. We have a whole lot of work ahead of us. But one thing is sure. The people in diaspora are saying that Africans, they sold us, they don't care about us. Because that was the story they told them. And you remember they said, if you want to hide something from the Black man, put it in a book. We don't read it. And because we are not reading it, we are not seen as enough Africans. Okay, so that trauma exists. How are we going to reconnect, build this bridge? It's honest truth sharing. Like the Black Life Matters movement was a movement just to fight for one injustice. Okay, how do we internalize that and become our way of thinking? But do you think the oppressor has stopped hijacking the minds of the oppressed? The answer will be left for the people in the audience live to answer. The moment we want this honest truth, we need to start testing our DNA. DNA education and awareness has to be out there, like massively. That we have to practice mutual empathy. And then that will kickstart the foundation of healing. To me, that's the only thing we do. Because if you don't know your ancestry, you don't have empathy. Like they said, if you are aware of your roots, reconnecting back to that root will be the next thinking, the next line of thought. So please, what AGL is doing is to help people look for their ancestral link. And once they find that, healing begins, because that's the foundation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Austin. I think you pointed something out, especially some Africans think that diaspora communities abandoned Africa. Why, diaspora communities feel rejected or disconnected from Africa. So it's two side ways of different feelings. And I look at it and I see mental slavery, because all those things are not true. And as you said, because we don't read, that's what the oppressor told us. And we believe that. But at the end of the day, one invisible wall that I see, so that I feel like is misunderstanding each other's pains and lived realities. We don't really understand our pains. We misunderstood it from different perspectives, from the diaspora and from the continent. So when this misunderstanding exists, the lived realities are not being seen. And that's why you will not see the empathy, why empathy will not be announced or felt, because of the misunderstanding that we have put ourselves due to the lies we have heard. And another thing you touched is the media stereotypes and lack of education. That has contributed to these misunderstandings on both sides. If the media, a lot of people listening to media, and when they listen to it, they don't pay attention to any other thing, to any history, to reading books, to educating themselves. So at the end of the day, from both sides, the misunderstanding that exists makes us or cause the fight. You see someone saying, go back to your country, or someone saying, oh, why are you here? So all those things come from I would say pains. And another invisible wall I would say is, diaspora searching and not seeing results. So because one will say, as you said, AGL is trying to bridge this gap through DNA. And that's when people will fully understand what happened, what transpired. Because of the curiosity of not knowing, we are hanging. You just assume because the truth are not there. And when we start seeing the truths, you will see that the assumption, the pains, the misunderstanding will start, you know, fading because the truth prevails everything. So reconnection starts with listening instead of judging. We listen, we educate ourselves. It starts with storytelling, cultural exchange, oral history preservation, ancestry exploration, language learning, and honest conversation. Because language is a barrier. When you understand people's language, you understand, why you belong to that place. Language brings this kind of belonging to a place. So when people start understanding the language of their ancestors, then the truth will start coming up. And that's what we are doing here in AGL, with the DNA and genealogy, helping many people reconnect with history, identity, and family roots, which will bring healing, that will bring truth, empathy, and intentional community building.
Thank you for that, Princess. And do you have anything to add, Christy? If not, then I wanted to ask, how do you think the history of the diaspora and the African community affect Black health today? Or Dr. Okumo, anyone can answer. I was just giving her a chance to respond to what Princess was saying.
Sure. I didn't have anything else to contribute to that, but I just want to again emphasize the issue of racism. When we talk about, if you want to put something in a book so a Black person can't find it, I'm botching it, but you know what I'm saying. Um, what we have to understand is that you would be murdered for reading. You would be hung. You would be hung from a tree or lynched if you got caught with a library card. And I'm talking about 19th century. I'm not talking about way back when. I'm talking about contemporary times. So literacy has been something for us here in America, that we have been disconnected from. So our language, you know, notwithstanding our language, our native tongue from Africa, but getting here in America and not being able to even access the alphabet, not being able to access a writing instrument to be able to know what script looks like. We were not allowed to do that, and we were punished for that. And there were rules and laws that exacerbated that. So I just want to be sensitive when we talk about African Americans not being educated and not reading. There's a reason for that. There were so many consequences for that. I mean, even up into the late 70s, you didn't have African Americans being admitted to medical school or nursing school. You couldn't go. So it's really important for people to understand, in the context of African American history, there were a lot of things that kept us from being able to have that love for literacy and reading. And so for me as an educator, I take it very personally to promote reading. Everyone in the diaspora, we all need to be reading 20 minutes a day. And we can compile a list, we can get a reading group, a book club, whatever we need to do. But everyone needs to read 20 minutes per day just to start, to get you going, because there's so much history that we're missing out on. We all kind of have the consensus. Most of us on the call have the consensus. I didn't learn that in school. They didn't teach me that. So there's a whole nother education that we have to get as functioning people in the diaspora to learn all this, because it was purposefully blotted out. It was purposefully a consequence for you being curious and you wanting to go the step further to learn more. So I just wanted to really be clear about literacy in the context of our African American experience. When you talk about being wounded spiritually, your human right, imagine your human right being taken away to read, to understand. That's your basic human right. And there's a spiritual element of self connected to that act of reading and writing and reasoning. And someone takes that imagination from you and takes that ability from you, and then couple that with someone telling you repeatedly, you're not human. You are inferior to me. You're beneath me, boy. You're beneath me, girl, which are negative connotations towards African Americans in America. Like, you don't even measure up. You don't even deserve to be called a human. That's why African Americans, we king and queen each other so much. We call each other kings and queens. And I know a lot of Africans are like, well, what's up with that? But for us psychologically, we've been beat down so much. It's like we have this vision of Africa of before all the junk, and that's what we're clinging to. Like, man, we were kings and queens, yeah. So we're grasping for something. We're desperate because our identity is so fractured, and we have suffered so many injustices, and our civil rights have been stepped on. And even right now, the Voting Rights Act is a complete mess that has set us back, the civil rights clock, back to the beginning. So there's so much internal trauma. Every time we take a step forward, we get knocked back 100 steps. So it's like we're constantly in a state of crisis. We're constantly in a state of trauma. But I have to say, I have to give Black people credit, Africans and those of us that are in the diaspora. We just keep ticking. We just keep going. And I know that that's a spiritual element. I know that that's something much deeper that we can learn more about, but there's something innate in us as Black people spiritually that keeps us going. So I'm proud of us, and I'm proud of this connection, this pull that Africa has on me. I don't have the answers. I don't know everything, but I'm interested and I'm willing to come to the table to be taught. And I know that there's other African Americans like myself that are like, we're tired of the nonsense of all this junk about we don't like each other and you this and you that. Because I'm gonna tell you, whenever I'm in the presence of other Black people, I don't care if they from Nigeria, South Africa, from down under, some Aborigines, it doesn't matter. There is some type of rhythm we have between each other. Okay? There is some type of dance that is happening between us. I can't explain it, but there's a magic. There's a essence. And so that's what keeps me going. That helps me to drown out the noise as I'm trying to get closer to the truth of my Blackness. It never fails. I can be anywhere with a multicultural Black person. And when I say multicultural, I mean they may be from Brazil, they may be from Africa, the Caribbean, wherever. We got something. And so that's what we have to hold on to as Black people. We have something special between us. Let's cultivate it. Let's really get into this idea of DNA testing. Let's really lean into finding out the truth in who we are and where we're connected to, because the healing has already started. We're in healing mode now just by having this conversation, just by being open to hear from our brothers and sisters and come together in unity. We're resisting this foolishness, these shenanigans, the stereotypes. We're resisting that and saying, we are a collective. We are Black people. Africa is home. So let's figure it out. Let's get it together. I am ready. I am just energized, and we're gonna do this thing. We read in 20 minutes a day, and I'm gonna check in with you to make sure you are.
I love this. I love this, Christy. And as I said, I'm proud of Black people all over the world. We are strong. We are intelligent. We are not looking at like what we have been through. We have passed through a lot, and it's still ongoing. But our spirit is strong. We are unbreakable, and that's what kept us going. So the more we are telling Black folks read, is just for us to, for our eyes to open to many other things, to fight back when things comes, when the oppressors come. You have something to fight back with because you know the truth. When you don't know the truth, they can deceive you. They can tell you one or two things that will break your mind. But when you know the truth, you're unbreakable. You tell them it's not what you're saying It's not happening to me. It's not getting to me. I know who I am, and I know you are not putting, something between me and my brother, because I know who my brother is. They love me. I love them back. It's just that the distance has separated us, but we are reconnecting. So that's what makes us powerful. We are really powerful people. We have gone ahead of so many things, not even looking like what I've been through. So I'm so proud of you guys.
Sorry, that was yeah. I was just caught in the moment. That was pretty powerful back and forth, and I was stuck on what you said that once you know the truth, you can't be separated. You can't they can't break you down, and the love you have for your brother, even if you're from two completely different cultures initially, you know they can't divide that once you understand how connected you two really are, or how we all are together as a community. And I think that that kind of piggybacks onto the next point I wanted to get to is, can DNA, ancestry, and genomic awareness help reconnect identity while also improving health awareness and prevention?
The answer is yes. Why is it a yes? Because from what we've all said, the evidence are compelling when you do DNA testing. Identity, disease risk. Today, if you know your DNA, you'll be able to know what are the kind of disease are prevalent in your lineage. Sickle cell, hypertension, they are all genetic based. When you know your DNA testing and genomics, you restore ethnicity, cultural identity. It's been proven. Today, the Africa DNA, the genomic database, have less than 2% representation of African genomics through research. What does that mean? That the medicine that are being produced for Africans might not be true cure for what their genes currently need. So when we have a database that is fully represented by Africans, first of all, the pharmaceutical industry needs it to be able to produce exact medication that will be able to treat these chronic diseases. Lastly, you connect living relatives across continents. Today, when I was in Germany, you see people come from children that were giving birth to parents, fathers, mothers that absconded, nobody knew, maybe deportation took them home. All they had was a picture of their fathers, and they came over to Lagos to look for their parents. Some succeeded, some did not. But what if there was a database that they could just go visit and take their samples and reconnect them? That reconnection to diaspora would be easy. So basically, this is the awareness that we are promoting, that please know your DNA, be able to connect with your relatives that are living across the continent. They might be in Brazil, they might be in Caribbean, they might be here in America or somewhere. But if you don't know, and if Africans here in diaspora, there in Africa, don't know their DNA, whatever reconnection plan we're making will not happen. And for me to last, for me to end, strategy is everything. I think what is happening to the Black American and the Black Africans that are coming here post Atlantic slave trade is that we lack strategy. Everything we do copycat, and we don't know the rationale behind what the original thinkers of those ideas that we imbibe, and then we are misled. And once you are told a lie for many years, it becomes true. Also religion. That's a talk for another day. But it's a yes. When you know your genomic awareness will help you to reconnect confidently, and that will improve our health intervention and prevent some of the health um, outcomes. And that's also speak to epigenetics, which means your behavior and your lifestyle kind of trigger some of the things that you don't know. Okay, the chronic illness. So it's good for us to know our genome. The genomic awareness will help us to reconnect our identity, where we are from, and where we are going to. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say, as an African American, that is so inspirational, to know that this is an opportunity for all of us to be involved in. For so long, we've been told, that reconnection was not possible, and to see how far we've come in our history, to see that we are all on the line together from all over, having this conversation together, and reconnection is possible. I know that for us as African Americans, all these diseases that plague us, I know that once we begin to go down this path, we're going to transform and we're going to disrupt those chronic diseases that have taken so many of our people prematurely, unnecessarily. This DNA information is going to usher in a new era of enlightenment in so many different ways. So I'm very excited to be at the beginnings of this movement. And I just urge everyone, in addition to us reading for 20 minutes a day, it's for us just sharing our stories, continue to be committed to storytelling, to talk about what we've witnessed and experienced in our own Blackness, to affirm other people in their Blackness, not to shame anyone for their experience or for how they grew up or the circumstances of their lives or the partner maybe they have chosen, but to really get to the root of what's important. And that's our connectivity. That's knowing the truth about who we are. And DNA testing is going to take us there. It's going to unlock so many truths that have been hidden from us, particularly for us in America that we have struggled so much with our identity. We've had so much internal dialogue about who we are. But I can tell you that the yearning is there, no matter, how difficult it has been. I can go back to question number one, my experience growing up. There were so many artistic visual representations of Africa and Blackness. We had so many television shows that depicted the relationships, a different world. I'm aging myself, but A Different World was one of those television shows is going to get a remake. So those of you that are in the newer generations, you'll get to kind of pick up on this notion of historically Black colleges. So A Different World was this fictitious television show about Hillman College. It was a fictitious, historically Black college. And so, as an African American girl growing up watching this show, I wanted to go to college. I wanted to learn more about Blackness. I wanted to learn more about Marcus Garvey and Pan Africanism. I wanted to know what it was like to be in Africa. I wanted to talk to African people. And that was all because of the art that was prevalent during my growing up. And that's how we got to learn about our Blackness and about Africa. So I want us just to continue. Those of us that are not really connected on social media, get on social media. That's where Africa is. Like, we're having conversations in the diaspora on social media. That is a wonderful place for you to get a fast baptism into what Black folks are talking about. Of course, my lane is the arts and culture and heritage, but for me, there's an intersectionality of this scientific work. It is going to unlock us culturally, the type of response we're going to have once we have that spiritual moment of knowing, once we have that spiritual moment of reconnecting. Can you imagine the art that we're going to create, the papers that scholars are going to write, the things that are going to come out of this enlightenment of knowing who we are? It's coming. It's here. So I just want to encourage you all to keep going, to follow us, to stay abreast of what we're doing, because this time, nothing is going to get in our way of reconnecting.
Yeah, you guys have said almost everything. So for me, DNA is not just science; it's connection, it's history, it's awareness, it's health. DNA, help people reconnect with ancestry, migration pathways, cultural identity, and even lost family connections. DNA has done so much um, that I can't explain. DNA that tells you where you came from, who you are, what runs in your bloodline. At the same time, it also exposes us to what runs in our family genetically. Some people don't even know what runs in their family. They don't know what runs in their bloodline, especially black folks. We don't have, it's a conversation we don't have. And it's affecting us because our data is not out there medically. Medications not working on us, and you're asking yourself so many questions. It's because we are not out there. And DNA can solve all these problems. DNA can bridge the gap between diaspora and the continent. I don't know if we can share like a document of someone saying that she can't find anybody in Africa, and also my DNA result. So you can see that you can't find any African countries in that result, and it's heartbreaking. Okay, just looking at this result, this is my result, and you're seeing the where I come from, like this my ethnicity, and at the same time, there are this is not even the image I was looking for. There is this image, that showed the countries, and when you are looking at those countries, you will see that African countries are not there, and the black people that are in there are just few folks. And you're asking yourself, are we not exposed to this thing called DNA that can help us reconnect? Just imagine this person crying. I wish I can see that image. This person crying of not connecting with people in Africa. She's African American, and she says science is faulty. You can see the pains in her voice. You can feel it, but it's not because Africa science is faulty that she can't be able to connect with anyone. It's just because people in the on the continent has not been exposed to DNA. And as Dr. Austin mentioned, we are the most genetically diverse people in the world. Why our data out there is less than 2% is a problem. It's a genomic gap, it's an ancestry gap, it's a reconnection gap. And because of that, people cannot connect, the both side cannot connect. Just imagine the world where the diaspora can start connecting to Africa, seeing close relatives, seeing real relatives. It can be fifth generation, it can be both, and Africans are connecting to diaspora. Just imagine that world. The truth will come out, healing will take place, everything will happen. People will start traveling to Africa just to know, oh, I want to know my surname. People will start knowing their ancestors' name, their last name. People will start discovering what really happened during the transatlantic slave trade. What happened about it's going to be beautiful. Just going to the airport to see someone that you didn't know that existed, but that in your bloodline coming to meet you at the airport and hugging you and saying, brother, welcome, welcome to your country. Just imagine that scenario. It's going to be beautiful. And that's what we are trying to build, where reconnection will happen is not only seeing percentages. I'm 30% Nigerian, and then what happened next? What happened? We are taking it further where you're going to see relatives, and that's what makes it beautiful. Moving from percentages to real people, seeing is not rocket science. This will be something real. And when we start doing this, not only that we'll see reconnection, our data will improve, our health will improve, because we want to have conversation. We want to prevent disease before it happens. So that's what yes. So this is the image I'm talking about. This is what this girl is saying here. Just imagine. It's just heartbreaking saying it, that the science is faulty because I can't be able to connect to anyone in Africa. And if you look at, just go back, you're going to see my DNA. So just look at this. Um, Okay, the countries are not here. Let me see if I can see the countries. The countries are still not here, but that will just it's just showing us that I have like that one distant relatives, and none of those that one distant relatives are from Africa. I was thinking I was even Nigerian, maybe 99% Nigerian, but I'm not. You guys can see I'm 71% Nigerian. So we want to move from percentages to us connecting real life. And that's what we AfriGenetry Link is trying to do, to connect heritage, health, healing, and identity in a way that community is put first. Our feelings are put first, because what we are dealing with is not just as I say, rocket science. This is not laboratory work. This is real feelings. These are real scenarios. These are things that happens to us just as the way it happened to me, where there is no health equity. Going to the hospital after I gave birth and seeing that the medication they gave me to apply wasn't working. And when I told them, oh, the medication was not working, they said, you know that the medication does not work on black folks, African Americans. That's how they put it. And it's heartbreaking. And the man was like saying it's because you data are not out there, so you guys are not included in clinical trials. It's just heartbreaking. So our goal is not just testing. Our goal is education, awareness, reconnection, long-term healing, and health.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for letting us see your DNA results. That's interesting to hear you speak about your expectations and what you thought was going to happen, as opposed to what you actually saw. And it is also difficult to hear, but also we need to hear people's frustration about um, the diaspora and the DNA and things of that nature, because these are conversations we need to have, and so we need to look at these things more positively, because honestly, I think if we really sat down, kind of like what Christy was saying, getting out there and having these conversations, I think a lot more people feel the same way than we realize. And I think we're stronger together. So we just need to come together and have these conversations. Um, but if there's anything else anyone else wanted to ask, I will leave the floor to you guys.
All right. So I at this time going to be supporting Christy and Princess and calling up on the churches today have a very big role to play in this reconnection. Okay. One of the things is that we try to preach wealth, how people can be economically empowered, and but we've not really preached back how we reconnected. If you look at the historically, when Jacob was made to become Israel, at the point when he was in diaspora, he decided to go back home to take his ancestral place. While we were not going to be physically able to go back home, it is the onus lies on individual, the government, and the church mostly to begin to create this awareness, this sensitivity that people ought to be well before anything. Now, if you know your genomics awareness, you'll be able to prevent health. When people sick, they go to either the hospital or the church to do prayers and fasting and all of that. But that is what a simple medicine, if they had known your genetic makeup, cosmic, could have healed. But people just spend a whole lot of time because of lack of awareness. For we shall know the truth, and the truth shall set us free. We now know the truth. How do we then work this truth to make us free? That's the thing that we should be like ruminating about at the moment. So all hands on deck. It's a movement. AGL has come to stay. First of all, you know to know the truth. And when that truth sets you free, what else do you need? You need to know what? Learn your history. Africans don't learn. Africans don't learn. And this is so bad. So I support Christy to say, let's continue to read. When you know your history, You'll be able to know what to say, when to say, and where to say. But because we don't know our history, we just want to just belong. The sense of belonging is one of the things that is actually making us not to reconnect and properly heal. Explore your ancestry. What did you do? Do your DNA test. Know your health story. Not everybody knows their health story. Today, when I came in, I heard that about 1.7 million people are diagnosed of cancer every year. And majority of these are Black folks. And they are middle income earners. And they have no money, no long-term care, no insurance. So while we try to reconnect and have that identity and come together as a community, that will help us to build up the lost economic base that we've not had, and then be able to support ourselves. Love covers the multitude of sin. If we love ourselves, a lot more could be done, right? The oppressor is not dead. The mind of the oppressed is still alive. Now we need the healing. Let's come together and do the healing. From my own end, I want to say this is the way forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Steen. Just to touch base on what you said about, us learning history. And there's something Christy mentioned too, that she learned, being black and the African nature and everything through history, by someone telling them, oh, this and that. The problem, as we are calling out the church, we are also calling out our government, especially where Black people are populated. In Africa, we are not being taught about slavery, transatlantic slave trade. Even here, and the problem with this history is when the future generation comes in, there are no archives, no oral history. If they don't have, when they are being treated a certain way, they want to know why they are being treated that way. And what is going to happen is they will bounce down to reading, and they don't have anything to bounce back to that we kept for them, and they're going to read the one the oppressor will give them or will give them. And at the end of the day, they are confused because the oppressor will give them what, when you are looking at it, is not is not reflecting the reality of what you are seeing. So we need to keep our history. We need to preserve our history. From school, being taught from childhood, not only people reading history or anthropology or whatever in school, but everybody needs to. That's why we even need to introduce DNA 101 in schools too, because it should be part of our. It's not when you study African, maybe course or African education in America, that's when you know your roots. No, it should be introduced, especially that's what we advocate for, so that people will know, and we know what they are teaching these kids, because they're our future generation. They're the one that will carry the ladder. We don't want them to feel pains, and when they question the one that are being presented to them, they will ask them, then if you question it, bring your own. And they don't have it. They don't have anything to counter what the oppressors will give them. Another thing I want to include in this is the Bible that you mentioned. Just by calling out our diaspora folks, brothers and sisters, to know that there is something that happened in the Bible. The Egyptians, the war happened. They went peacefully, not even through slavery, because of Joseph, and they stayed in Egypt. That didn't make them Egyptians. They stayed there for years. But the day God said, they were even tired. They said, we want to go back because they were being treated like like slaves, even though they thought, oh, this should be our country because we have been here, we have invested, we have worked so hard, we have contributed, we have done everything. But at the end of the day, the way they were being treated, the history came back that, oh, you guys don't belong here. Even the people, Moses that rescued them, also said, I don't belong here. Even that was, I should be a priest, I should be a prince. But because of what the mom told him, you are not part of these people. he should be a prince. If it's me, I'll be like, "Ah, you guys perish. I'm a prince now. I'm comfortable." But at the end of the day, he said, "No, I need to fight for my people." With Esther as well, Esther did it. So we have come to a place, even though I know that we are not being treated well, but in a quest of, we are born here, we don't know how it happened, but just looking out of the box and knowing that Africa loves you is something to just think and ponder on. And you are being accepted. You are loved. You are so much loved. And I believe that the more we start populating our DNA and start connecting, that truth will start coming out. But just have that at the back of your mind. Before you are American, you are African. So before they call you American, there's something called African that was forced to be called African American.
Ashe. Okay. I hear you, sister. Yes.
That's a mic
Yeah.
drop moment for sure. Yes. So if we don't have anything else, I suppose that'll be the end of this topic for today. Um,
So let me just say this as part of closing thoughts for us. So this is a message from AfriGenetry Link. You've had it all from my own end as the program director. We need your support out there to bring the message back home and to get people connected. There's the project 1212 that is ongoing. My CEO is going to speak more about that. But until then, let's continue to learn. Let's heal. Let's connect. Let's come home together. It is together, each of us will achieve more. That's the teamwork we do here. Your support is needed. When you hear this message, harden not your heart. Africa needs you. You need Africa. Reconstruct your minds. Develop yourself. Resist the name middle class. How can you be a millionaire in your home country and you come to a place where you become the poorest of the poor? This is a modern slavery, and this reconnection movement will help to address that. I see a whole lot of Africans sold their hard-earned accumulated wealth to relocate to the Western world, only to find out the story was different. The deception is still there. To those people that slave trade took down, we kind of empathize with you. It's not your fault. But there's a certain kind of bitterness that still you guys still hold in your hand and let go. Forgiveness is called 70 times, 7 times, right? The Bible says. But one thing I just know recently by research is that it's easy to forgive others, but it's very difficult to forget oneself. So let us begin to learn to forgive ourselves so that we can properly forgive others. And this movement is real. This is the beginning of the episode. We will be having this monthly. You look for the next episode, and we invite you to join and go to YouTube, go to Facebook to watch whatever we have. Thank you, and thank you for being part of this. Over to you, my princess.
Yeah, so I believe about to talk on that. The project of million you can just donate is a project of the Great Reconnection, reconnecting Africans with the diaspora, and we have said enough already about it. And if you want to know more, you can also visit the website by going to what you are seeing just on the screen, afrigenetrylink.org.
All right, everyone. Well, I will go ahead and wrap up there. I want to thank you again, Christy, Dr. Akumo, and Princess, for being here today and having such an important conversation. As was said over it again, be sure to check out AfriGentry Link's socials, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and our website for our upcoming projects and our Project 12 Million. And get out there and have these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. I love you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you. We love everyone. We love you all. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah.